Well, a verdict tonight in the case of Congo militia leader accused of war crimes. The International Criminal Court in The Hague has ruled Mathieu Ngudjolo not guilty of ordering a deadly 2003 attack on a village. The decision closes a dark chapter in Congo's civil war in which about 200 people died at Bogoro in DRC's Ituri province. Prosecutors allege that Ngudjolo used child soldiers, directed attacks against civilians, and that forces under his command committed murder, rape, and acts of pillaging and sexual slavery. The court ruled that prosecutors failed to prove Ngudjolo's connection beyond a reasonable doubt. The attack on Bogoro came as the civil war ended. Many of the victims were hacked to death with machetes. Now, reaction to the verdict is coming in. Geraldine Mattioli-Zeltner is an advocacy director for the International Justice Program at Human Rights Watch. I spoke with her by phone from Brussels just a short time ago.
The judges have insisted that this finding that they made today, which was that they didn't have enough information beyond reasonable doubt to confirm that he was the leader of the combatants on that day, that doesn't put into question that crimes occurred that day. It doesn't put any question that Lendu combatants attacked Bogoro that day, and it certainly doesn't call into question the suffering of the population that day.
What is Human Rights Watch going to do now in the light of this acquittal?
We will continue to call on the Office of the Prosecutor to do two things, really. First, to look into who armed and financed the rebel groups in Eastern Congo, because according to our research, these militias, they were not operating alone. So we do hope the Office of the Prosecutor will look at those who back armed groups. And if you look at North Kivu today and the rebellion of Bosco and Taganda, you realize that once again it's supported by a country of the region, Rwanda, and we believe it's very important that the ICC look at those high-ups responsible in other countries and in Kinshasa for arming the militias. And we will also press them on reviewing and improving their investigative practices and their prosecutorial policy.
That is Geraldine Mattioli-Zeltner of Human Rights Watch. And now for more on the acquittal of militia leader Mathieu Ngudjolo, we are joined via Skype by Scott Edwards of Amnesty International. Mr. Edwards is the Managing Director of Crisis Prevention and Response. Welcome to In Focus and thank you for being here, Mr. Edwards.
Thanks for having me.
So what are your thoughts as an organization on this finding by the judges that the evidence against Mr. Ngudjolo was contradictory, sketchy at best?
Well, I mean, I guess sort of mixed. I mean, on the one hand, it's good, of course, to see that the ICC has completed its second trial. You know, and we're supportive, of course, of the court's work and what it represents. You know, I think we recognize that there's going to be disappointment that many of the atrocities that had occurred at the time have yet to go unanswered. And in fact, that there are really thousands of people who've never really had their day in court. So it's certainly mixed.
Now, of course, the prosecutor says it is going to appeal and hopefully some more information will come to light. But groups like yours, Amnesty International, what's your role at this point in trying to, shape the direction of the outcome?
Well, we engage in advocacy and research, and certainly we like to see the research that we produce, very strong research on culpability, actually see used in justice mechanisms. And we're certainly going to continue our research in the DRC and the grave violations that are occurring there now. We still have to look at the ruling, and the Office of the Prosecutor certainly, it sounds like they will appeal. I think there's some challenges that have been raised in this proceeding with really the cost and the sort of challenges with relying so heavily on witness testimony on crimes that occurred so long ago. So, finding any ways in which our research can support justice mechanisms is something that we're invested in. And of course, we have larger concerns with the DRC, namely that a number of responsible parties really haven't had their day in court. And we still see high-level support for armed opposition groups that do indeed commit war crimes.
Now, Mr. Edwards, obviously, many are questioning the fairness of the ICC at this point. But when you look at the fact that Thomas Lubanga has been convicted, he's serving a 14-year sentence also for crimes in the Congo, this acquittal, some would say, that is justice taking place, that some are guilty, some are not. As Amnesty International, what do you see in terms of the ICC's effectiveness in really judging cases like this?
I mean, the ICC is a court of law, and Amnesty International and human rights law in general is found on the rule of law and due process for those who are accused of crimes. So certainly because we have yet to secure justice, or we see justice secured for the crimes that occurred in Ituri, that certainly isn't any sort of indictment of this incredibly important in terms of human history system that we have to address the worst crimes committed. So, I mean, we really have no opinion on the outcome so much as we support the process.
Mm-hmm. Tell us what you're hearing from the ground. What has been the reaction, if you've heard at all, from the victims now, who maybe might be feeling that the justice has slipped through their fingers?
Well, I certainly haven't spoken with any of the victims, so I wouldn't want to say, but one would certainly imagine that there's disappointment, and that's certainly understandable, especially when one considers that this was an individual among, again, thousands who happen to have a day in court, and yet there are thousands who haven't. So justice is a long way off right now in the DRC, and I'd imagine, and I can only imagine that victims are indeed very disappointed.
Well, we really appreciate you joining us. Thank you so much, Mr. Scott Edwards of Amnesty International.